All right, good morning. We will get started. So I'm Jessica Berg. I'm one of the co-deans here at the law school. My partner, co-dean Michael Scharf, sends his regrets. He is in China. One of the advantages of having two of us is we really truly can be in two places at one time. I'd like to welcome you to our 5th Annual Women's Law and Leadership Conference and begin by thanking our sponsors, many of whom have been sponsoring us for all of the years that we've been doing this, and we thank them very much. I also want to take a chance to thank our excellent staff who you see moving around the room, and in particular Annie Schwartz and Bridget Schaefer, without whom none of this is ever possible. The conference itself is part of the law school's commitment to dialogue about leadership and law in general, and more specifically about women leaders. Our first woman alum graduated in 1922. The following year, we graduated 3 more women, including Margaret Lawrence, who actually went on to become an assistant prosecutor here in Cuyahoga County. And for any of you who follow any of the history of women in law in this area, she was a very big proponent of women and women's issues and very active in the bar. We now graduate approximately the same number of women as men, and our graduates lead law firms and businesses, become general counsels, and hold political office. The conference is planned each year by some of these extraordinary alumni. This year, our co-chairs are Kathy Brandt and Susan George. Kathy is a partner with Thompson Hine, previously partner in charge of their New York office, and firm-wide chair of the Commercial and Public Finance Group. She's undertaken multiple leadership roles within her firm and throughout the community. Susan is the Senior Director, Enterprise Risk and Compliance at the J.M. Smucker Company. She's also served as Director and Managing Counsel, Senior Corporate Attorney, and Corporate Counsel. It is with very great pleasure I turn the podium over to Susan to begin our day with a very timely Women in Politics panel.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Jessica, for the introduction here. So, as Jessica mentioned, our first panel of the morning is entitled Women in Politics. And the objective of the panel here is to focus on the challenges and opportunities that women have in the political sphere and roles that lawyers may and possibly should take in public service. This is intended to be an academic and nonpartisan discussion, although, of course, this is occurring just days before the 2016 presidential election. So we might get into that just a little bit. And we have some very esteemed panelists here with us this morning. They have amazing careers behind them already, so I'm not going to go through every detail of their careers, but please do read their bios in the materials that you have in front of them. However, I will introduce them at least briefly. Sitting directly to my left is Ann Womer Benjamin. Ann has served as the mayor of Aurora, Ohio, since winning a 6-way race in November of 2013, following 2 years as an at-large member of the Aurora City Council. She's done a lot of great work as mayor, and I'll let her share some of that as we get into the discussion. She's been in public service for more than 20 years and has also served as state representative in the Ohio House of Representatives for Aurora and most of Portage County, where she served on the House Finance and Appropriations Committee and chaired the House Criminal Justice Committee. She also served 4 years in Governor Taft's cabinet as director of the Ohio Department of Insurance. And she was a member of the State Board of Education, where she was elected vice president and appointed by Governor Kasich to the Ohio Tuition Trust Authority. She's an attorney by profession, practiced law for 24 years, first at Black McCuskey, where she became the first woman partner. And she spent 18 years at Ardern Haddon in Cleveland. Anne received her Bachelor of Arts degree magna cum laude from Vanderbilt University and her Juris Doctor from Case Western Reserve School of Law. She and her husband, David, have 2 daughters and 2 grandchildren. Please welcome Ann Womer Benjamin. And then sitting to Ann's left, we have Representative Kathleen Clyde. State Representative Kathleen Clyde is in her 3rd term in the Ohio House of Representatives. She represents the 75th Ohio House District, which covers central and southern Portage County. She's ranking member on the Government Accountability and Oversight Committee, and also a member of the Finance Committee and its Transportation Subcommittee, the Public Utilities Committee, the Ohio Constitutional Modernization Commission, and the Ohio Ballot Board. She earned her bachelor's degree from Wesleyan University in Connecticut and her JD from Ohio State University. She graduated as a public service fellow with the dean's highest honor. During the 2008 presidential election, Kathleen served as an election official with the Franklin County Board of Elections, overseeing the setup and operation of the Franklin County Early Voting Center. And she then became deputy legal counsel to the Speaker of the Ohio House. She's a noted expert in election law and has spoken on election issues at Ohio State, Capital University, Stanford, and Harvard Law Schools. So please join me in welcoming Kathleen. Sitting to Kathleen's left is Sunny Simon. Sunny has served on the Cuyahoga County Council since 2011. She was the inaugural vice president and currently is chair of the Education, Environment, and Sustainability Committee. During her time in office, Sunny has worked to make our new county government accessible and transparent and to restore the public trust. She's helped to establish the Office of Inspector General and to create the strongest ethics policy in the state. She has sponsored legislation supporting domestic partner benefits for county employees, reducing pesticide use on county property, directing casino revenue to suburban communities, and providing veteran housing. Sunny is the vice chair of the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission and serves on the Cuyahoga Drug Court Board. She's the former president of South Euclid City Council and founded the South Euclid Humane Society. She holds an honors degree from John Carroll University and a JD from Case Western School of Law. And she has a private practice as a member of the family law section of the Cleveland Metro Bar Association and also served as a volunteer juvenile court magistrate in South Euclid. Please join me in welcoming Sunny. And then finally, on my far left here, is Susannah Wellford. Over the past 16 years, Susannah has founded 2 organizations designed to raise the political voice of young women in America. In 2007, Susannah founded Running Start to inspire young women and girls to political leadership. Running Start has trained over 10,000 young women and girls to lead in politics all around the country. Running Start furthers the work begun by the Women Under 40 Political Action Committee, which Susannah co-founded and led for 5 years. A nonpartisan organization, WolfPAC is the only political action committee in the United States devoted to helping young women of all parties run for elected office. Susannah travels around the country speaking to colleges, law schools, political groups, and nonprofits about the importance of inspiring young women to lead in politics. She meets regularly with groups from around the world as well, including most recently Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the Palestinian territories. She was invited to Kuwait by the Kuwaiti government to meet Kuwait's first women candidates and to advise them on their campaigns. After receiving her JD from the University of Virginia School of Law, she worked for several years at Verner, Lipfert, Bernhard, and McPherson and Hand, lobbying for state and local governments, foreign governments, corporate entities, and trade associations before Congress and the executive branch. And prior to law school, Susannah worked for Hillary Clinton's healthcare task force in the Clinton White House. She's also a former legislative assistant, and then she is a graduate of Davidson College, currently lives in Washington, D.C. with her twin sons, Ben and James. Please join me in welcoming Susannah. Okay, so now that we've gotten through the formalities, I'm going to hopefully turn it over to the panelists and let them do all of the talking from here on out. And the first question that I would like to pose for the panelists is just to ask them what made you decide to go into politics, what was your career path to where you are now? And maybe we can start with Anne on this question.
Well, good morning, all of you. I always knew I wanted to be an elected official. I always respected what was going on in government and believed that government was at the heart of everything that happened. I don't know how I came to that belief, although my father, I know, was very involved representing Cleveland teachers in Columbus, so he probably inspired me to some extent. But I was far too practical to jump into it right away out of law school, and practiced law for 24 years and had a family and, all of that, because politics can be pretty unreliable. But, what it's all about is the opportunity. And I was kind of looking for some outside activity as I was practicing law, and the opportunity arose, and I seized it. And frankly, I think that's a lot of what politics, getting into politics, is about. You can't always plan it. There are those who do, but you have to really recognize the opportunity and take it when it's there.
Thank you, too, for having me here. I'm so glad to be with you this morning. I would say that I didn't always know I would be in politics, although I cared about political issues very much, even from a very young age. I've been telling the story on the campaign trail this year that I was the only person in my kindergarten class to vote for Mondale Ferraro, because I wanted a woman in the White House even when I was 5. So I'm kind of pumped that we may have that opportunity here in a few short days. But so I cared about issues and thought about things all of my young years. And really, when I was in law school and working around the State House, I was lucky enough to go to law school at Ohio State, which is a couple miles from the State House. I did some internships in the Ohio Senate and with the Ohio Secretary of State. And I just got exposure to the legislature and saw that there were a lot of young people in the legislature. There were a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, mostly men at that age. And I thought, it would be good if we had some young women represented as well. And I also noticed in law school, a lot of the men talked about their political futures and they're running for office one day or when they were elected so-and-so. And I didn't really notice women saying those same things. So I just started saying them. I wasn't really sure I was going to do it, but I thought, well, hey, we need to have women talking about their political futures as well. So I just started talking about it, and kind of before I knew it, it was a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It was only 2 years after law school that I was running and elected for the first time to office. So it's a lot of paths, and I'm honored to actually serve in the seat that Anne held before me and was a great leader in. So this is a fun panel, especially.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Good morning, and thank you to everybody who put this together. So I had no idea I'd wind up in politics. I had a path to go to law school, become an associate partner at a firm, and take that path. But I found myself more and more being involved with political issues, being at the polls, working on campaigns, and spending my time advocating for environmental issues, women's issues, and before I knew it, after law school, I bought my first house in South Euclid and wound up in a neighborhood that was going through some changes. There was a lot of, I didn't know this when I bought the house, but there were drug dealers in the neighborhood. People were leaving in droves and a lot of white flight. And I had this house, I wasn't going to move. So I really committed to doing everything I could for that neighborhood, for the community, and ended up being this activist, which I really didn't know what I was doing, but totally turned around because of these efforts, the neighborhood. We had community policing, and our neighborhood now transformed into really a different kind of place in South Euclid. So that gave me an idea that I can make a difference not only at the sidelines, campaigning for other people, giving money to organizations, being at the polls, and truly made this change without even being elected. And I had the idea that perhaps if I was an elected official, I could even do more. And that led me into the path of being on the city council in South Euclid. And when the new government formed in the county, that was an opportunity to really step up and be able to use my knowledge and legal expertise in this brand new Cuyahoga County government government, which was seen as a beacon on the hill, a new kind of government, a transparent government coming out of a corruption scandal. So that was an opportunity, and I just really followed my passion. And I think that would be a message that, always just follow your passion, and doors will open. So I am really pleased now to be part of this new government and serve the residents of the county.
Thank you, ladies. And one of the things I forgot to mention at the beginning, but if you have questions in the midst of the presentation, feel free to raise your hand. And it looks like there is a mic in the middle that you can, I'll leave some time at the end if you want to reserve questions, but anything that comes up on your mind that you'd like to ask, feel free to pose it even throughout the panel. And Annie has a mic that she can bring around if you raise your hand if you have any questions. But it's interesting to listen to these women who have had very successful careers and done very well in politics, but they are talking about the opportunities presented themselves, or, it was kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, as if they almost lucked into this, which is not the case, right? They've had very esteemed careers and excellent education and worked hard to get to where they are. But a question to Susannah, what are the barriers that are keeping women out of politics? What makes it harder for women to get into politics, and what made you interested in kind of pursuing this initiative of Running Start?
So I have been involved in politics all my life, in part because I grew up in D.C., and it's very difficult to live in D.C. and not really just be immersed in it. It's everywhere. It's all people talk about. So I knew from an early age that I wanted to be involved. It did not occur to me to run. Isn't that interesting? I mean, for years, it wasn't a thing I thought about. So even though I had these political jobs and then went to law school, it wasn't until I had graduated from law school and was working at a firm and lobbying that I started to think about the fact that women really don't hold power at all in the same way men do. And so this was true in my law firm, where there were 2 women partners out of many, many. But then my job was, I was lobbying as, on Capitol Hill and in the executive branch, and there weren't women in power who I was lobbying. I ended up, talking mainly to men. So the young female associates and I would sit around and we would say, where are people? Where are our role models? We're in our early 30s and thinking about where we want to go next, and there just were not that many people to look up to. So that was when I co-founded this group to help get young women under 40, to run for office, or actually we would support the ones who were running for office. And what we found is there were some amazing young women like Kathleen, who ran for office at an early age. And it was fabulous being able to support them. And we support, the group is still going today, we support anybody who is running who is a woman under 40. So it's a very, very low bar to get our support. However, here's what happened. So when I was running the group, I realized, if my goal was to get more women into Congress, because the goal really was, if you get into politics at an early age, then you are going to end up at a more powerful position in politics. And men do this all the time. So men run for political office at a really early age, and then 20 years down the line, they're chairing the committee that makes the real decisions, that gets the bills heard. And but women don't do this. But what I realized is every year the PAC had this tiny handful of women. We'd go all around the country. We mainly supported congressional candidates, and there weren't enough. And so that's why I decided to found Running Start, the nonprofit that I now run, with the aim to start really early changing women's mindsets about what political office is, about what it means to serve. Because what we see in the research is that women feel that they're not qualified to run, which sometimes is interpreted as we don't have enough confidence to run, which can be true. Sometimes we don't see ourselves as leaders. But I actually think that it's really much deeper of a thing. I'm sure all of you in this room are very confident, ambitious people. But what I think it really means is that you don't see politics as a place where your skill set is used, and that you think that these skills are things that somebody else has, and it's like I was telling these guys last night, it's like if somebody said to me, you should be an engineer. And I'd be like, well, wait, no, I don't know anything about being an engineer. I couldn't do it. And so my job at Running Start is to talk to these young women, tell them you are qualified. You do have this skill set. Anything you don't know, you can really pretty easily learn. And so that's what we do. We're trying to plant that seed at age 15, or age 20, so that by the time they are a little bit older, they absolutely know that they can run.
Susannah, you mentioned that they do have the skills and may not recognize. What are the essential skills for being a politician?
Well, all of these women have them in spades. So you have to be able to do public speaking in a way that you're not just presentable, but you actually can connect with the audience. And you have to know what your message is. You have to really, we tell for a high school girl, imagine if she was networking with you all in the crowd. She needs to have a message. She needs to know what she wants you all to know about her. So being able to message really well. And then there are hard skills like being able to speak on camera, being able to answer a reporter's questions. A lot of those skills are very scary. The idea of standing up in front of a big room or networking with a big group of people, or God forbid, being on TV, with a big TV camera in your face. But imagine these high school students, most of these skills they've never had to do. And so our job is to give them their first try in a really real life setting. So we bring in big name reporters from DC to interview them on camera. And it's terrifying and they hate it and they tell me that they're not going to do it. And then they do it and they don't die. And so they've learned a skill. So that's really what we do.
Anything else you guys would add to what skills are essential? I would think that, that willingness to be in the public spotlight at any given time and to know that you are kind of always on. You don't really get to go out and have a private life, and you're not being compensated the multi-millions of dollars like celebrities in Hollywood to do that and to give up that privacy.
Susan, I would just say, I think you're absolutely right. I learned early on that when you are an elected official, you are the property of the public. And even when I was a state representative, which is basically part-time, it's not. It's a 24/7 job and then some, because you always have to be available. Same with being a mayor. I'm sure same with being a county on county council. You are the property of the public. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is you have to be willing and able to survive intense scrutiny, especially in this day and age when it's only getting worse. And you have to be able to survive the very false and sometimes completely manufactured reports that come out of that close scrutiny, and you have to figure out how you're going to handle it. So it is very intense.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
So, and part of this is risk taking, and that was something I really was able to observe about this political realm. It's really about taking a risk and putting yourself out there to perhaps fail. My first race I ran, it was a ward race, and I think everybody that runs thinks they're going to win, and I was naive, and I took a risk, and I lost that first race, but not by a lot. I ran against an incumbent who was very popular, and I was just devastated that I lost. But I came so close, which really made people look and say, oh, this is somebody who has some potential, and I got support the next race and won. So it's really about putting yourself out and taking a risk and willing to perhaps lose, but then even with leadership, it's taking a risk about a vision and idea and taking it out there a little bit further and willing to get some backlash, but really having a vision and risk, I think, is really important.
I think that leads nicely into the next question I was going to ask here, which is just what is it like to endure a political campaign? Something that probably most of us in this room will never experience, but how long do you have to plan ahead for the campaign? How intense does it get as you get closer? Is that a full-time job in and of itself? I'd be interested to hear from those who have run for office?
My very first race was against a 12-year state representative incumbent. And I knew it would be extremely difficult, and I knew also it might not turn out well for me. But all I can say is if you just commit yourself to it, it is an absolute endurance test if you do it right. I just kind of laugh sometimes at some of the candidates in our county. We're not in Cuyahoga, we're in Portage, who don't get it. They don't work. They don't understand how you have to reach out. I knocked on probably close to 5,000 doors in that first state house race. Then another really hard race I had was in 2002. I actually ran for Congress in a three-way, and the seat was open, and because it was a three-way, the powers that be thought I might have a chance. And I decided I was going to run in January, and the election was in November, and I don't think I slept for 12 months. I did not sleep, and I lost 30 pounds, and it was just completely nonstop. But you have to do that. And by the way, I did not win, but I did come in second, which was a good thing. But it is nonstop. When I ran for mayor, it was in a six-way kind of free-for-all against 5 men. And I knocked on more than 2,000 doors. I mean, to me, campaigning is very grassroots. I don't care whether it's a state rep race or, frankly, even a statewide race or a local race. You need to reach the people in some fashion, and it takes a lot of time.
I would say that is all good advice and very accurate. And the endurance test part of it is real. I think about studying for the bar exam and how it's not pleasurable. It's not something you look forward to. But you block the time and you put your head down, and for 2 or 3 months, mine was a little shortened because it was a presidential campaign year, but it was just you just have to get through the material and set a schedule for yourself. And my first political campaign was in 2010, and there is a bit of a formula depending on the different race that you're looking at. I will say the idea of running for Congress, running statewide, even state rep in some cases can be pretty daunting, but there are other elections that are very important, like school board or township trustee or a village or city council, that make critically important decisions and have big budgets and serve a lot of people. So those are always things to think about. I know for my race, the first time I ran, I knocked on 12,000 doors, probably 8,000 myself, and probably 2,000 my dad, and 2,000 other volunteers, law school friends, etc. I sent a handwritten note to every single door that I knocked on. People still talk about that today. That is a really effective campaign tool. It's really hard. It takes a lot of time. And I also raised probably $120,000 the first time I ran, which I would say one of the skills that's very helpful to have if you're looking at running for office is the ability to raise money, and to ask for money, to have the organizational skills to oversee a fundraising operation. Now, if you're running for a lower office, the budgets are, sometimes you don't have to raise as much money, but I know for a congressional race, it's frightening, the amount of money that has to be raised. And I've raised more each of my cycles. This cycle I'm over $300,000 And that is just part of, unfortunately, a very important part of the job. And a lot of people don't know that and think that they can do it without that part. It's hard. It's hard to do that if you want to go kind of to the state or federal level.
Yeah, so all those things are true. I give up if there's an election, just carve out 12 months, a year to 15 months and get a couple pairs of shoes and start knocking on doors. And not everybody does that. And I think that's one of the most effective ways to connect with people. And I've always learned from the residents that it's important not only to get votes, but to learn about the communities. And I represent 6 different cities and how different the cultures are, amazingly, in all these different cities. So it's really learning about the cities and about the needs of the cities. That's what door-to-door is. It's not about necessarily getting a vote. It's about learning about the community and how to position a platform when it comes time to get into office and know what each community is looking at and needs. So in terms of the intensity question toward the end, what's happening with elections now, they're moving up. We have early voting. So it used to be when I first started to run, it was election day was the day. Everything was timed for the election. Now it's 30 days out, 40 days out. So it's just getting accelerated and more intense, and it's more intense earlier.
Susannah, are there things that you do to help people prepare for the elections as they're nearing? And I mean, do you have to train ahead of time, sleep deprive yourself ahead of time to make sure you're ready for the actual campaign trail or anything like that?
Well, I think what all of the other panelists said is so true, that you have to look at it. I love the bar exam analogy, because I think you do have to look at it as it's going to be incredibly difficult. And so we don't sugarcoat it when we're talking to these young women. We're not like, this is going to be great and everybody's going to say nice things about you and it's going to be wonderful, because it's not like that. But I think that a lot of life is, if you have an expectation that something's going to be hard, but you know you have great passion, you really want to do this, you want to do it because you think you can really do some good by being in this position, then I mean, you know, I'll ask you guys again, but I feel like that is the fire that gets you through these difficult times. And one thing that we didn't talk about so much that every single class of young women that I speak to asks me about is, you know, why would I want to run when they're going to say such terrible things about me and talk about my hair and that I'm fat and that my clothes are wrong and my heels are too high or too low, or I'm, you know, everything. And I think that the answer is the same for that too, that, you know, if you think you belong there and that you can do good, then we're all capable of having a thick skin and saying, I know who I am, and I'm not going to let this affect me. Or maybe you go home and cry a tiny bit, and then you get up the next day and you say, I can do this. And I think that's so true of all kinds of leadership. So it's not just in politics, that if you're going to be a leader of any sort, you're going to be scrutinized. And so it's having that confidence and knowledge of yourself that I think really gets you through.
You know, let me just add, Susan, the passion does fire you. And you can learn to some extent as you go along. You can adapt as you realize what you really have to do. When I first ran, I had no experience running for office at all. And my husband and I would go around to church dinners and, you know, events all around the county. And I would sit in my seat and eat dinner and say hello to people occasionally, but basically sit in my seat. And after one of those dinners, we went home and he said, Ann, I am not going with you anymore because the purpose of going is for you to meet everybody in the room. And I said, oh my God, I can't do that. Are you kidding? He said, and then I'm not going with you. So the next time I tried it, it was really hard, but I went around and shook hands with everyone in the room. And it gradually got easier. So you can learn. Walking into a huge packed room of people you don't know, I still have this moment of terror in me, but I've learned to overcome it. So you can.
I want to say one quick thing too, and it's that along with the scrutiny and criticism and thick skin you need, which I completely agree with all of that, there are rewards that come that help you get through the tougher things or the things that are said. You know, when you get an endorsement from a major Ohio newspaper and they say nice things about you, or you're quoted in an important story pushing a policy issue, or a constituent comes up to you when you're at the grocery store and says something to you that you helped them do. I remember, I don't remember it, but I helped some young man in my district get a wheelchair through Medicaid and state agency bureaucracy that he was trying to deal with. And he came up to me, and I was surrounded by my family, and said, like, you made a real difference in my life. You got me my wheelchair. I was just like, you know, I had tears in my eyes. What? You know, the kind of things that you hear. And I would say those outnumber the negative things. As you all know, negative things stick out a lot to you, and they're what you think about. If you hear 9 positive things and 1 negative, you're thinking about the negative thing. But you got to remember there's so many rewarding moments as well that really get you through the tougher parts of it.
Yeah, if I can just add, I don't think any of us would be doing this if it was just all negative and difficult. It's actually invigorating. Every time I'd go out, I dread it, and you know, I've got to go out again and knock on these doors and go to these things, and then at the end of the day, it's like I feel invigorated in its relationships. It's really about, you know, connecting with people for me, and at the end of the day, I've had really great friendships come out of this and lifelong changing relationships. So it's really positive, or else we wouldn't be doing this. Right. Yeah.
Hearing these stories, I don't think it's at all surprising. Watching the presidential election, you can kind of see the health of the candidates deteriorate over time, and you can see them looking more and more tired. And I just couldn't imagine that. I mean, taking it up, you know, so many levels to the presidential election, I don't know how they even survived that. But I want to shift a little bit to gender differences. And, you know, we talk a lot about, you hear negativity through the election process, and you have to be prepared to take some hits here and there. Are the hits different if you're a female versus male? From your own experience or what you've seen in other elections?
I'll give you a short answer. Yes, because they are candidates, but I talk to so many candidates, and I think that the scrutiny has got to hurt in a different way when somebody is criticizing you not because of your stance, but because of how you look. I really do think that's got to be difficult. And especially for younger women running, there was this candidate who we were attached to in Virginia, and she was 27 years old. She had long hair. She actually looked a little bit like Kathleen. She had long hair. She was tall. She wore high heels, and she was a mother of a 2-year-old. And people just raked her over the coals because she didn't look like a candidate, or who they thought was going to be a candidate. She was running for Congress against a 65-year-old white man, and she just looked so different. So I think that has got to, it's got to hurt. And so it just, you know, it means that we have to be tougher and say, I may not look like who you think is a candidate, but I've got fresh ideas. I'm going to come in and I'm going to shake things up because I think differently than the people who've been there. And so that's got to be our response. But I do think it's that criticism of the way we look, or that we don't look like a politician, that has got to hurt.
Does it change once you've been elected? As a politician, do you feel a difference in the way that you're perceived or treated based on your gender?
It's like, I would say that it is a challenge to deal with, and I think it might depend to some on the setting. I know in the Ohio legislature, you know, women are way outnumbered by men. I think we're around 22% of the legislature. And all of the leadership positions are held by men. There's a leader for each Republican and Democrat for each chamber. And that's very typical. There's been very few women. There's been one speaker that was a woman, maybe a couple minority leaders. I can think of one. So it is difficult to be in such a male-dominated environment all of the time. I am often in meetings where I'm the only woman in the meeting. I'm often in public hearings where it's a public body and I'm the only woman on the public body making decisions sometimes about women's issues, domestic violence legislation. And you see, too, some of the issues that touch women dealt with differently or not dealt with because that's really just not on the male agenda. So those can be frustrating obstacles as a woman trying to advocate for your issues, but also say, oh my goodness, this whole segment, half the population is not being treated equally or well represented. So those are challenging things. And yes, I mean, I certainly have faced a lot of comments about my appearance. I've had some ridiculous encounters with colleagues and people around Capitol Square that are, gender related, and that is very frustrating. But one of the ways that we'll solve that is by having more women around, more women staff and more women in office. And I'm always thinking of ways that we can try to do that.
I think when I was first in the legislature in '95, there were not a lot of women, and I think there were maybe 2 women lawyers, of which I was one. And I do believe being a lawyer really helped me at that time because it gave me a credential that many, if not most, of the men did not have. I used it. I used my knowledge of processes and my understanding of, legislating and things like that, and did some pretty unique and creative things that caught some notice. In fact, at one point, believe it or not, I was actually asked to apologize to my caucus because of some very unique and creative things that I did, which were absolutely legitimate, but they, were I guess, an affront to some of the other guys. But I think, for me, what we all have to do when we are in leadership of any kind, and it was true, frankly, in the law firms I was in, you have to get people to be comfortable with you, whether it's to become a partner in a law firm or to sit at the leadership table with your colleagues, most of whom may well be male. And so you have to figure out how you, as a woman leader in that situation, can be effective, can get them to be comfortable with you. Because if they're not, what you say isn't going to have nearly as much impact or effect as if you figure out how to be a strong, credible voice. And I think, in everything I've done, being a lawyer certainly has always helped, the training as well as the credential.
So my experience has been different. I have found that being a woman in politics nowadays is an asset, and that the women have the edge politically. The population now is we have the majority, and my experience is if you're a woman, I can take one of the cities that I represent that was all male, their council, their leadership, and there was a woman who ran for council, and I knew that because she was a woman and qualified and and a lawyer in this community in particular, she was going to do really well, and she came in on top votes. So I have a much different perspective now. I think women have the edge, and I'm seeing that all around me now, that things have shifted now. And in fact, in politics, for judges, judicial races, city races, you put a woman in, and typically there's an edge. So I encourage anybody in this room or who's listening, if they have any inkling to run, don't let this be a barrier. In fact, I think it's going to start to shift significantly.
Actually, I think being a woman has been an advantage for a long time when you're running. And in fact, when I first ran, I was told, it gave me 3 points or 4 points or whatever, typically. Now it's perhaps more. But it is still, from my perspective, still a bit different when when you've won that race and you're in the ring and you're trying to deal with your colleagues, whether they're on a mostly male council and you're the mayor, or you're dealing with a mostly male state house and a male governor and a male whatever, and you're there. So I agree completely with respect to running as a woman, and I do hope it continues to get better, but it's still a very male-dominated arena once you get there.
And can I just add one thing, is that, what I think we're trying to get to, I'd like parity, total parity in politics at every level of men and women, but the researchers talk about the tipping point, that once we get past a certain level, it becomes kind of, nobody thinks so much about having women in, and there's way less scrutiny. And so some people say that's 20%. I think it's actually a little bit higher. I think it's more around 30%. So Congress right now is just under 20%. If the election goes a certain way, then we could actually end up with significantly more women, although it's still, I'm trying to remember, I think it's maybe gaining 10. So instead of 104, we have 124 or 114. It's still not fantastic out of 535, but I really do think it's about getting to that level where we're not as interesting. It's like, oh yeah, of course there are women here, and we're not quite there yet.
And so it sounds like you do see it changing. Is there momentum behind it? I mean, is the political landscape truly changing where good qualified women are interested in going into politics and succeeding in politics more so than in the past?
So I think that from my point of view, so I began doing this work of training young women in 2007. It's been, almost 10 years. And when I started, nobody was training girls, because I really do train, the 14-year-old girls. And it was considered a very strange thing to do. 14-year-old girl's not going to run for office anytime soon. So why invest in them? But the world has started to focus on the fact that if you start empowering girls, then you will help society get stronger. So all around the world, there are programs now that really do focus on empowering girls and young women in education, in leadership, et cetera. So I think in that sense, there are more younger women thinking about leadership and seeing themselves as leaders. I don't want to be negative, but so this year we might get more women in Congress. We also might not. And there actually are fewer women running in the House than there were last cycle. And I think that some of it is just what we were talking about, that this has been an ugly cycle. It really has. It's been like one of the ugliest political campaigns that we've ever seen. And so fewer women running. And for Running Start, we saw our numbers dip. Our application numbers dip for the first time. And interestingly, last time Hillary Clinton ran for office, we had this crazy thing happen at Running Start. So it was only our third year, and we were accepting, in end of 2008, right after the election, we were accepting applications for the following summer. And we had 50 spots available for high school girls from around the country. We got 30,000 applications for those 50 spots. And I know exactly why, because I read all the applications. they felt politics was hopeful, and they felt that people who were not just the mainstream, who'd always been in politics, they were getting a chance. So, we had very different people on the ballot, and then a black man won the presidency. But this time around, I think it feels a little bit different to people. There's less hope. So hopefully that will change soon, and we'll be more hopeful.
I think on your website, as I was preparing and getting to know the panelists, I think you have some great blogs on your website, and one of them is talking about how we can kind of support each other as women and help to propel each other's careers forward. And one of those was nominating each other for awards. Are there any other ones that, off the top of your head, ways that we can kind of support each other in our careers, just the people in this room?
Still, and this is not just true in the United States, but anywhere I go, women do talk about how women don't support other women. And in my life, I've been really supported. I feel like I'm so lucky. But I think that making sure that we are the sort of people who are going to support the women coming up right, beside us and below us, and not being just... So I still feel twinge of jealousy when somebody who's my same level gets something that maybe I wanted. I mean, I'm a human being. This happened just last week where somebody got something. I'm like, oh, I wish I'd had that thing. But I think that it's just about being mindful about how we as a gender are only going to advance if we support each other. We have to, okay. A great example was this article about the White House the other day, that the women in the White House are still in a minority. They'll be sitting in a staff meeting, and, Sunny will say something, and my job will be to say, Sunny has a really great point. Okay. That sort of thing. So we are actually elevating and amplifying the voices of the women around us. So, I think that sort of thing has not always happened. I think it's so crucially important because, you can do it for purely selfish reasons. If you do it for other people, if I do it for Sunny, she's going to do it for me next time we're in a meeting, and it raises all of us.
I love that story because, not to digress a little bit, but if any of you have sat in a big room where it's probably mostly men and some women, oftentimes if you have an idea and you share your idea, everybody will kind of look at you and look away and not say anything. And then 10 minutes later, a man will raise that exact same idea, and everybody will nod their heads and say, oh yeah, wow, that's a great idea. And it's like, how does that happen? So that idea of reinforcing, right from the outset that was Sunny's idea is very helpful in and of itself.
And frankly, men can do this too.
Yeah, so, yes, absolutely.
It's not just our job.
Other questions? We have a couple more minutes here. Question here?
Yeah, I had a quick question about, we talked about women in politics and, how you can maybe not necessarily be a candidate, but you can have support candidates. I was wondering, do you notice a lack of women in lobbying positions and how incredibly important and influential, a lobbying position can be? If you could just speak briefly about that.
Yeah, in the Columbus, for sure, there are very few women lobbyists, and there are a lot of lobbyists. I think there are 11 lobbyists for every legislator lobbying all sorts of issues. But yes, there are a small amount of women. They are well connected with each other and support each other. And are connected to the women legislators. It's a small but mighty club that we are working to make bigger.
But you think of what their job is. Their job is to persuade the legislators that a certain position is valid and appropriate. And that persuasion comes from credibility, and frankly, I think women have a harder time, for a variety of reasons that we've discussed, building that credibility for themselves so that they can face off with a legislator and be convincing and persuasive. So,
And that's where our legal training comes in.
really helps. You're exactly right.
Yes.
I just have to say, in DC, just anecdotally, it seems like every woman lobbyist I meet, every lobbyist I meet with is a woman. So I would actually, now I'm going to go back and look and see whether that's my perception or not. But there are certainly really big company offices in DC that are run by women, government affairs offices.
All right, well, thank you. I think now we actually are out of time this time around, but these panelists have been fantastic, and clearly we have a lot of engagement from the audience. So I really do appreciate the fact that you've taken time out of your schedules to be here with us, and I think everybody in the room appreciates it. If we could just give them a round of applause. Thank you.